Okay, perfect. It looks like we've got a pretty good quorum. So thank you again for joining. Once again, my name is Joe Stalker. I'm the founder of Patriot Consulting and very excited for this presentation. So today we're going to be talking about co-management between Intune and uh, Endpoint Manager, in particular Configuration Manager, making that transition. And I'm going to hand it over to our presenter today, Josh Gatewood. And we'll do a quick round of introductions for everyone else we have here with us as well. Go ahead, Josh.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I am Josh Gatewood. I work at Patriot, helping clients get set up on Intune.
Hi, my name is Kevin Vanover. I'm a principal solution architect for Patriot Consulting, specializing in Intune and Config Manager.
So thanks, everyone, for taking your time out today. And today we're going to dig into co-management. So co-management, it utilizes Microsoft Endpoint Manager or Intune with Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, often referred to as SCCM. So we're going to talk about how you can use both of these simultaneously to manage the endpoints in your organization, talk about some best practices, as well as how you can configure this in your environment. So the first thing is like, what is co-management? I've heard this term. What does it do? So co-management allows you to concurrently manage your devices using both SCCM and Microsoft Intune at the same time. And it has various workloads that you can offload to one or both of the services, depending on what the workload is and what the needs are for your environment. And then setting it up, it also allows you to upload your devices that are in Configuration Manager to Intune using Cloud Attach, and also Intune enrollment through the co-management that once it is get set up. So we'll dig into some of those sliders and what it does. So here is a topology of how co-management works. So this is the Configuration Manager and Microsoft Intune, and notice the app workloads and the policy workloads, how they can both work simultaneously, or one in one place and one in the other place. And that all depends on how you configure it. So you can have a group of devices to where, you know, Office gets installed here, and then another group of devices where Office gets installed from Configuration Manager. Same thing with like Windows Update policies, endpoint protection policies, and your client apps. So the prereqs to get it to get co-management set up is first you got to have the license, right? So you gotta have, you know, Azure Active Directory tenants. You got to have Intune, and you of course you got to have like SCCM built. For the configuration manager, it's 1710 or later. 1710 came out a couple years ago. The currently supported version of Configuration Manager is 2010. This is something that 1710 and later. You also need to have like your devices, Azure AD or hybrid Azure AD joint. So for your workstations to be co-managed, that's also a prereq. And I mean, obviously you got to have Intune, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, as well as Configuration Manager built. Your Windows devices, they need to be 1709 or later. And so 1709 came out about 2017. 20H2 is the currently supported version as of this presentation. So you can also use Intune and Windows Update for Business to update features. We'll get into that in a little bit. The permissions and roles. So you got to have access, right, in Azure AD to set up an app endpoints, and you also need access in Configuration Manager to be able to set up the cloud attached co-management piece of it in order for that to work. You can also scope roles once it is configured so that you can have like a group of technicians just be able to view specific features instead of doing the full management and administration. All right, so how do we set it up? Well, we've got a video. Hello, today we're going to set up co-management and Cloud Attach in Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. To do so, open up Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, go to Administration, Cloud Services, and then Cloud Attach. Now we're going to configure Cloud Attach. So opening up the wizard, we're going to sign in. I'm going to sign in using an Azure AD GA account. All right, got my password right. You may, when the sign-in prompt comes up, it may ask you to add it as a trusted site, or you may have to allow the IE enhanced security configuration, change it to off for the administrators to allow for that login. All right, so there's the default settings and the customized settings. So we're going to use the customized settings just so we can talk about what is going to be setting up. You can also optionally import a separate web app to synchronize the config manager client data, and we're going to skip that for this video. All right, so the reason we're signed in with our global admin account is because it can register an application into your Azure Active Directory tenant, and so we're going to authorize this. All right, and then so we can upload all of our devices, which is recommended. If you just wanted to test and upload just a specific device collection, you can also do that as well. So we have pre-staged a couple of device collection, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to use our co-management eligible device default collection that has been created. And the reason we're doing this one is so we can just show off like different connections and configurations. And so this is going to upload this specific configuration. The endpoint and analytics, we're also going to enable that because we want all the telemetry data that we can get. And for endpoint analytics, there's also specific permissions that are needed in order to do it. And so read under the help desk or endpoint security manager. All right, I'm going to click next. All right, so enablement. So automatic enrollment into Intune. So you can just have a pilot collection instead of doing all of them to begin with. And we're also going to use the same co-management eligible devices because we want all of our eligible devices to be co-managed. All right, and then so this is the configure upload. This is going to do the cloud attach. So this will upload your devices into Intune so you can see them. And this will actually flip on the bits to allow them to be enrolled into Intune. And this is one of the many ways to get your devices enrolled into Microsoft Intune. All right, here's our summary. And we're gonna click next. And it's working. Come on, green. Let's go green. And we may have some video editing magic that occurs to where you don't see this. Oh, nice. Maybe not have to because that wasn't too long. All right, so the task is completed successfully. Woohoo!
Great job, Josh. That was really, really awesome.
All right, thanks. Yeah, we didn't even have to edit the video for when we was doing the installation. So that's how long it took us in real time when we did the configuration. All right, so with co-management, there's also the cloud attach piece that you may have heard us mention. So what cloud attach does is it allows you to view your devices inside of the Intune, the Microsoft Endpoint Manager console. So all that's needed is the SCCM agent, and then the device is synchronized to Intune. So then you can manage that device and view that device in the Intune portal and even use the CM pivots tools and your other configuration management tools. Fun fact that we found out the hard way is that you need to make sure that the account that you're logged in with has access in Configuration Manager to view the device. So like cloud-only accounts, they're generally not going to work unless they have like line of sight to your Configuration Manager. So co-management, the SCCM agent is still there, and then it also allows for that Intune enrollment. So through co-management, it's a easy way to mass enroll your devices. If you're already running Configuration Manager, you can enroll all the devices that is in Configuration Manager through a collection, or you can just select all, which we'll get into on the next slide. And then once it's there, the workloads can be customized as needed for your business needs. And like you can, having them in co-management, some of the main benefits is it allows you to have your devices pre-staged so that once they're in Intune, they can be converted to autopilot devices. And you can also leverage some of the advanced security features that's available in Azure AD, one of them being conditional access policies. All right, so here's where, going through that video that we just watched, this is where the first First picture is for the configure upload for the cloud attach. So we did a specific collection, but you can also upload all of your devices all at once. And so doing that, it doesn't hurt anything because it's not going to apply anything. It's just going to allow you to view them. On the second picture, this is where the automatic enrollment into Intune occurs. So we did also select just a specific device collection. You can also select all instead if you wanted to have all of your devices. As soon as they're in Configuration Manager, you also want them enrolled into Intune. So generally, as we're building this out and we're testing it and kicking the tires, we will have like a pilot collection that we'll use before we turn it to all to allow for us to, fully test it out, especially if there's like some change request processes that are needed in order to mass change the devices. All right, so this is the slide right here. This is where the workloads are. And so these are the various workloads that you can manage to where, do I want this workload in Intune? Do I want this workload in Configuration Manager? Do I just want to test it with Pilot Intune? And this is the various workloads that you can change. So in our in this slide, so in our demo environment, we Pilot Intune for every single one of them, and then Office click to run. It's just fully Intune. So for that specific one, Intune is managing it and not Configuration Manager. Whereas the other ones, where they're set on Pilot Intune, as long as they're in the device collection for Pilot Intune or the staging collection for that workload, they'll be able to be managed within Intune. And then the rest of the devices that are not in that collection and not Intune enrolled, they can still be managed via Configuration Manager. So you're probably thinking, well, what does these sliders mean? Well, let's talk about it. First one is compliance. All right, so the compliance workload, this is one of the first ones that we work with clients that we generally move over because a lot of times compliance, it can be set inside of Configuration Manager, but generally it's not a feature that a lot of clients use. And the compliance policies, it sends the signals that can be used for your conditional access. So on the right where you see it says grants, you can grant access if the device is marked as compliant. And what that means is that Intune will check the device to see if it has things like antivirus, firewall, BitLocker. You can check for OS version. You can do some customization on scripts and things like that. And if it is compliant, then it'll be green, and then you can use it to allow access to, say, email or custom line of business apps that's set up in Azure AD.
One of the most popular things we're doing is we're integrating VPN, so Palo Alto, Cisco ASA to Azure AD via SAML, and then we can use these conditional access policies to require that any machine attempting to join your VPN, has certain minimum, security things like, antivirus, firewall, BitLocker. But also, if you have Defender for Endpoint, we can actually verify from the EDR signal that there's no current threat on that machine. So as Josh mentioned, this is definitely one of the first workloads we would highly recommend moving over because of this. The second recommendation, if you notice that first checkbox, require multi-factor authentication, that's only as good as the human's ability to interpret a push notification. So if a user, is targeted by a hacker and the hacker gets the password, the user gets this like yes, no prompt on their phone. If they make a mistake and hit yes, right, now the hacker is in because of a human mistake. This particular control is a game changer. The ability to do device level of authentication is the difference between, an organization where humans make mistakes and you get compromised versus other organizations where you're not relying on the human making a mistake. You're only allowing your controlled devices to connect to your network. So this is definitely one of our top recommendations. This is part of the overall Microsoft Zero Trust strategy. And again, just wanted to really emphasize the importance of starting off with this workload. And I love, Josh, how you mentioned that in most environments, people are not really using compliance in SCCM anyway. So it's not like there's really any deterioration or any negative impact. It's really just a net positive here, right?
Yes, absolutely. And compliance doesn't set anything, so it's not going to make any firewall policies. It's not going to configure BitLocker. It's just going to say, do you have this? Yes or no. And then it's going to report back in if it's compliant device. And there's also inside of Intune, there's some compliance reporting that's available so that you can have like your team monitor that to see if you have like any devices that are not compliant, find out what it is, find out why it's not compliant. And most likely it's going to be because BitLocker hasn't encrypted yet. All right, so now the next workload is our device configuration workload. All right, so the device configuration workloads, that allows you to like manage settings on your devices in your workload in your organization. And then it's an important thing to point out, and we'll point this out several times, is you see how endpoint protection and resource access policies kind of like indented a little bit? So this is like, those are sub workloads of the device configuration workload. So if a device, if you're wanting to move the endpoint protection, so the MDE over to Intune, instead of using Configuration Manager, it needs to be in both collections for that specific slider. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So it's kind of like, you get a call, it's like, my computer's not working, and you say, you turn it off and on again, right? That's always like step one. So this is the most common thing that we run into when onboarding MDE with co-management and it's not working, is because the devices aren't in both places. And so there is exceptions. If you set up a configuration manager device configuration policy, you can actually override this globally, depending on that policy, or you can just use Intune to set up your device configurations. So here's a breakdown of those two sub workloads, the endpoint protection. So that's your defender for endpoints, anti-malware. And a great thing about it is that once you move that slider over, once you move that workload over to Pilot Intune, Defender is just like, or Configuration Manager is not going to say, hey, it's not it no more. This isn't me. Intune, you got this. It's going to wait until that handoff is fully done. So there isn't like a gap in your protection. And then for the resource access policies, it's VPN, Wi-Fi, email, certificates. So that's where the resource access policies are. For me, this kind of like a unicorn or Bigfoot. I've heard about it, but I haven't ever seen it. So if you guys are using Configuration Manager for one of these, please let us know in the chat, just because I want to know if that's actually being used. So main thing is the devices must be in that device configuration workload, and this one for it to work. All right, the client apps workload, this is the big one. And this is generally the last one that we move over because you can have, you've got years of applications that you've put into Configuration Manager, and moving them, it does take some time. There isn't like a lift and shift that is available to move them. But a great thing is once the app workloads is switched over to Intune, you can install apps from both places. So what we generally see is like new apps go directly to Intune, so you don't have to refactor them later. And this allows for you to be able to leverage your current application catalog for your users to go in and select them. So with the applications, in the company portal app, that's where you'll be able to see both of them simultaneously. So, and this is moving the apps again. This is generally the last slider that we move. And if you currently aren't using Configuration Manager for apps, then going to co-management is even more simple. All right, this is Office Click to Run. So the Microsoft 365, this is generally like with compliance, this is kind of like 1B of the sliders that we move over fast. And it's just because using Intune to push out Microsoft 365, you just use a GUI, right? So it's really easy and it's really simple to go through and select the specific apps that you want to use for Office, for your deployment, the update channels. You can use the monthly channel or the current channel or even the semi-annual channel. And then it'll also, where it says remove other versions, you can set that as yes. And so this will kind of be like the version of Office to rule them all, right? So this will take control of Office and the Office deployment, the Office settings, and you don't have to go through and do the custom XML. There are reasons to do that. for specific cases that we'll talk about later. But this will take over the configuration of Office and allows you to manage it at scale to make sure everybody's got the current version of Office, they got the same version of Office, and you can even push out a specific package for Visio or project if needed.
Josh, I'd like to add to this real quick because it's front of mind. If you'll notice there on the left, when you're using this methodology for creating your Office package, you don't see OneDrive here for you to be able to select or deselect. So in the custom XML version, so if you go to config.office.com and you build your Office deployment policy within that interface, it gives you the capability of deselecting OneDrive, but more importantly, uninstalling or deselecting the legacy version of OneDrive, which was groove.exe, which we have seen cause problems for organizations because users end up with both versions installed on their endpoints and they don't know which one is which, and they'll pick the wrong one, and then you have to get involved with IT to remediate that. So I definitely wanted to make sure we pointed that out while we're talking about this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I don't know if groove.exe or chrome.exe, which one takes up more resources, but if you got both of them on there, computer's probably running slow. All right, so this workload, Windows Update Policies. So the Windows Update for Business via Intune. This allows you to set policies on your device, and you can have multiple update rings that allows you to control like a pilot group, you can have a test group, you can have a production group. And then so instead of using like the WSUS and Configuration Manager to push out your updates, you can just allow for the cloud-based updates. And this is one of the big benefits of co-management, especially as we have like our workforce right now is a lot of organizations have a remote workforce, and people don't always come into the office, and when they're at home may not connect to VPN, so their machines aren't getting updated. So this allows for those machines to be able to get updated remotely directly from Microsoft based upon the settings that you configure. So you can also control quality updates, feature updates. They even have out-of-band updates if needed. So where if there is a break glass update, there was one, was it last month or the month before on ARM processors? So if you had ARM processors in your environment, Microsoft had like a 0-day patch that you could push out for those. The feature update portion of this also allows you to push out like 21H2 or even Windows 11. So here at Patriot, what we did is, for me and Kevin, we tested it out first to push our devices to Windows 11, and then we rolled it out for the rest of our environment, and it was a success. So I was able to upgrade to Windows 11 fairly seamlessly. And on the right is where it says, you see where it says type mobile device management. So that shows like you can check on the device if you go into the Windows Update settings to see where the setting, the source of truth for that specific setting is. So a lot of times there will be like group policy. It'll say group policy if you're using config manager, group policy, or a third-party tool. And this will just show you that, hey, Intune's got this setting now. All right, so now we're on the staging tab. So the staging tab, this is where you can select a specific device collection that workload goes to pilot Intune, right? So you can use the same device collection for every single one. If you've got, say I've got these 5 test devices, I'm gonna test everything on these 5 test devices, you can use the same collection. But if you wanna use like different workloads to test on various devices, you can come up with different device collections. So notice the device configuration, endpoint protection, and resource access policies using the same collection on all 3 of those. And that's because of what we called out earlier, that the endpoint protection and resource access policies are sub workloads of the device configuration. The Office click to run apps, how there's nothing to be able to select for browse, and that's because we moved that slider all the way over to Intune. So it's all the devices that are enrolled through co-management instead of a specific device collection. Reporting is also available for your cloud attached devices that are co-management inside of the Intune console. And what's great about this is it allows you to see which specific workload is managed by what, right? So you see at the bottom where it's like, resource access, Intune VM One is Intune and Intune VM2, that's Config Manager. So this allows you to see which workload is where. With this report, when you do go to generate it though, depending on the size of your environment, it might take a little bit. Even with a smaller environment like ours, it still took a couple minutes. All right, Kevin, I'm gonna hand it over to you to talk about client success stories.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh. So one of the things that I wanted to touch base on was device health. And this goes back to the compliance slide that we were talking about earlier. And a lot of times what we're missing is security from the boot point. What do you do to secure your endpoints when the devices are in booting before the operating system comes online? And this is where we can take advantage of the capabilities of devices that are in co-management, and you have Intune capabilities at your hand where you can then use BitLocker to require the devices to be encrypted. But then also I can use secure boot and code integrity using compliance device health. So I can make sure that the device is using a verified UEFI to boot into the device. That gives me that secure boot. They go hand in hand. So what you're getting here is you're getting a device that's being secured or verified that it's secure before it allows it to boot into the operating system. So this is going to help you prevent or remediate rootkits, any sort of ransomware that might get into the device and try to load before the operating system can come online. So that's very effective. Now, what we have to validate that is within Intune, we have the Windows Health attestation, that's a hard word to say, that report that we can get analytics on what devices have TPM, a supported version of TPM, what devices have secure boot enabled, and then from there we can go ahead and implement that compliance policy so that we ensure our devices are being secured at the boot process as well. Now, going into Office, I sort of hit that when we were in that slide. I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of the ability to configure the XML deployment process for the Office. I'm not going to touch on that again. But then going into the next one here, we have Autopilot. With Autopilot, when we have new devices coming in, or we want to target our existing devices that we have that are managed by SCCM, this is a way that if the device goes into a non-workable state, if we target that device for Autopilot prior to, we're going to capture that hardware hash ID, and that device is going to be registered within our Intune tenant. So if the device is reset, we can tell it, hey, you're managed by Intune at this point, and it's going to, without the need of a golden image, if it just had an OEM image on it, it will reset that device and go ahead and give it a production-ready machine within an hour. It depends, it can go 30 minutes to an hour depending on the number of applications and config profiles that it has to push down to the device. But for new devices, you get that zero-touch deployment capability. Those devices can be registered from your OEM or your point of sale so that those devices will know that, hey, they're managed by your Intune tenant and they have to adhere to any config, any compliance, any conditional access, any application offerings that it has available to it. It can't do anything else. So it gives it a much more automated, streamlined UBI user experience. So all they have to do is provide their authentication information and it'll take it over and automate from there. So that gives you back some time as an IT staff. Okay, remote workforce. Josh sort of got a lot of this, so I won't spend too much time there. But the point here was to make that, if your devices are connected to the internet, you don't need or have the need to see the on-premises topology to get updates, to get configurations, to get application offerings. Those can be viewed from the device without a cloud management gateway from SCCM. Those devices will be able to see the application offerings provided by Intune in that case. So it's something that's really geared towards that hybrid workforce, whether they go on premises or whether they're out working from home. You have a much richer feature set to support and can deploy and manage those devices. So with that, I hand it back to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, and thanks for that insight. So co-management, it really helps out to allow for your devices to be cloud managed while still being managed by Configuration Manager. Kind of think of it like when you're migrating to Exchange, you could have like a hybrid Exchange model. So you can have like a hybrid device model so that you can allow for your devices to use the advanced security features such as conditional access, so you can start gearing towards that zero trust model, and also allow for the remote workstations to be updated directly from Microsoft, so you don't have to worry about them pending updates and failing. So with that, we're going to open it up and see if there's any questions.
Hey guys, there is a question that came in regarding the latest kind of Windows Auto patch. So with that announcement, is that required to move machines from SCCM over to Intune to take advantage of Windows Auto patch?
No, and that's a fantastic question. So with auto patch, they have to be into Intune. So you could leverage co-management to get them into Intune to start using auto patch.
Okay.
So
and then for those that haven't heard of auto patch, I'll kind of maybe share with you what I've heard about it, and you guys can maybe fill in any gaps. So my understanding is, let's say it's Patch Tuesday, and you really want to get patches out there as quickly as possible. But if there is a problem, like let's say it breaks the ability to print, right? Auto patch, my understanding is it can auto roll back a patch that Microsoft through telemetry has determined is problematic. Is that correct? And anything else in terms of value or benefit of considering Windows Auto Patch?
yeah, so another. Yeah, that is correct. Another value of auto patch is that it scales. So if you have an environment with a couple thousand machines, auto patch will deploy the patches in various groups. Using the Intune Windows Update for Business, like you can set up and target specific groups, but with auto patch, it will kind of create dynamic groups based upon the Windows machine learning in the backend to determine which groups gets the patches at what time.
Okay. And in terms of the workloads for co-management, you covered, several of them other than, say, compliance and perhaps the update one in order to take advantage of auto patch. What are your feelings in terms of using Intune versus SCCM for patching third-party software? Are there any benefits of one over the other? Do you ever see a scenario where you would maybe leave that capability with SCCM compared to Intune? Kind of thoughts there for third-party patch management.
Yeah, so third-party patch management with Configuration Manager, you have to repackage and redeploy the app. It's the same thing with Intune. There is a supersedence that you can do for when you do have to package a new app. But you say there's like a new update for Chrome, and it doesn't automatically update for the new version of Chrome. You still have to repackage it, just like you had to do for Configuration Manager.
Okay. Are there any horror stories you guys have had where you turned on a workload and swung it from config man where you had to immediately swing it back? Any gotchas or anything you've run into with any of these workloads? So in particular, you've got maybe some gun shy, SCCM admins out there wondering, okay, do I need to really be concerned? And I understand the pilot mode is really how you can control that, but are you guys aware of anything where you had to like revert any of these workloads back?
The main one that's been the problem is the not having like those like the resource management and the endpoint protection in that specific device collection, and then having to wonder, hey, what's going on? We're trying to onboard all of our devices to MDE, and they weren't showing up. So that was like the biggest horror story, so to speak, that happened. It was that the expectations were they were going to be there, but it just was an oversight in the configuration. So once that was corrected, the devices started to onboard, and it was a good day, right? But in that moment, where it's like, where are they at? Why is this not here? Everything appears to be correct, and they just weren't in the specific group for that device collection. With the Office Click to Run, there was one time where we deployed that, and the client had deployed custom shortcuts, and those custom shortcuts never worked again. So that was the only one on Office that's ever been like that. But the rest of the sliders, they have been pretty good. The updates by using Configuration Manager, you can get more granular with the updates than you can inside of the Windows Updates for Business inside of Intune. Because the Windows updates inside of Business Intune, word salad there. The updates from Intune, they push the entire quality update for the month. So instead of saying, I just want, these 2 KBs, I don't want all of them, and pushing them out, it does just kind of give you all of the quality updates for the month.
Mm-hmm. Are there any
Couple
reasons?
scenarios, yeah.
Yeah,
Can,
yeah.
may
Go
I
ahead,
jump?
Kevin.
Yeah, so there was
Yeah,
a couple
absolutely.
scenarios I wanted to throw out that I've seen where it's been a challenge when SCCM has been in the scope of work, but then it doesn't necessarily need to be sometimes. I've had clients where they have SCCM deployed, but they're not really using it. They're not managing any workloads. It's just there, and they didn't know, and so they thought, well, because they had SCCM, that they had to have co-management enabled in order to achieve what they were wanting to do. In that scenario, we've been able to help clients back out of that footprint and not actually have to enable co-management, where we could just do direct to Intune. Other scenarios I've seen where it's beneficial to help educate the client is when they have server workloads. Sometimes they want to continue to manage their servers, but Intune doesn't support server workloads. So in that scenario, we've helped them maintain the workload management or the endpoint management of the servers within the co-management space, and then continue to move the endpoint workloads to Intune, so they continue to get that high level of control and management of those servers. We have had some clients that will look to Azure Automation and Arc in order to manage servers and do updates, but that is a little bit more complex, and sometimes there's a give and take there. So half a dozen, one or the other.
Okay. What are some of the greatest misconceptions about co-management that you've heard, kind of common misunderstandings that you commonly run into?
That as soon as you turn it on, it'll immediately be there. So there is some sync cycles that do have to occur. So the configuration manager agent has to check in to configuration manager, and the configuration manager has to upload its Intune, and then Intune also has to sync. Turning it on, there's kind of like a check back tomorrow and then wait for everything to sync, because there's multiple processes that have to occur in order to make that happen. So that's probably like the main one, is that it's not instant.
Yeah, and one of the prerequisites, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I was going to say, one of the prerequisites where I've seen that there's been confusion is, when you're enrolling devices, what credential should be used? Should it be user credential? Should it be device credential? And this is going back to the hybrid Azure AD join and the auto enrollment. When you're doing co-management, it should always be device credential. When you were just doing hybrid Azure AD join with Intune, Microsoft used to recommend that it had to be user credential. That's how it had to happen. You had to have a primary refresh token that would exist on the device. And so if you had third-party identity management tools, that could cause problems. So you had to make sure you address those things. But with co-management, you use device credential, and co-manager or SCCM is going to be responsible for getting that device enrolled for you. So user interaction is not required in order to get those devices enrolled.
And that really helps with like those unattended devices, right? If you have like training room devices or conference room devices and things like that. So that is a excellent call out, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And then Josh, can you speak to the endpoint security blade? It looks like there are some policies that can be pushed down from Intune to servers. Maybe how, like what's required there, what's involved there?
Yeah. So for that to work, that is it's not necessarily Intune that's doing it, even though it's in that endpoint security piece. So it allows you, once you get your server onboarded into like the security.microsoft.com, then you can start pushing out server-based policies. So this co-management, those sliders for co-management, they are all about like the workstations, because Intune and Endpoint Manager, Microsoft Endpoint Manager just targets workstations and not servers.
There's a question that just came in from Joey. He was asking about the GPO analytics feature. Can either of you maybe speak to your experience on migrating GPOs to Intune and how the new GPO kind of analytics feature in Intune can help with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is like it's not a co-management feature, but the GPO analytics in May, there's a button that got lit up that says migrate. So you can export your GPOs to XML format and then mass import them or import them one at a time into the group analytics. And so the group policy analytics will say, hey, this specific setting, this is where it matches in Intune. This setting has been deprecated, and then a lot of them, sometimes it will say, no, this one's not supported. It's either been moved or it's called something else. So you'll be able to like find it a different way. And then so that migrate button, it creates a device configuration profile that you can then use in Intune to assign to a group of devices. So it used to be, hey, this is really neat because it tells me what's available, and then I got to create my own policy. But now you can migrate it, and it uses a settings catalog to migrate it based upon the ones that are available. And you can even go through and say, you know what? I don't need this old Vista policy that's in here anymore, even though it is supported, and I'll just leave it out, and then just create your device configuration profiles that way.
It's really good. Now, Kevin, a few years ago, we had clients kind of coming to us for standard hey, can you please deploy Intune for us, or can you migrate us from say an AirWatch or Workspace ONE or Mobile Iron for either mobile devices or workstations. And this is probably a good segue, maybe Phil, to talk about how we really offer two options now for clients, right? We can of course deploy Intune for organizations. We can of course help transition from Configuration Manager over to Intune using co-management. But can you guys maybe speak to how we now offer a managed service for Intune, which can include the deployment and the support, or just the support?
Of course. Yeah, so with Secure Shield, we have a SKU or a model, I guess, that's called Platinum. And with Platinum, we're able to give you a baseline deployment of Intune, which includes the ability to enable co-management. So this will help customers make that transition. Nothing has to happen that's impactful to the devices or users. It just gets the baseline set up. And then from there, as they mature in Intune or within the co-management space, they're able to contact us through a ticketing system, and they can say, we would like to do this, or we would like to do that, utilizing Intune. And so then one of myself or Josh or one of the other members of the Intune support team will respond to that and give them guidance, and or if need be, we would set up a project scope to help them deploy said feature or ask. So that's just the high level overview of it. Now, if you already had Intune deployed, if you already had SCCM deployed, and you're just looking for a support resource at the tier 3 level, we do have a model that fits that as well. And if you're migrating, go ahead.
That makes sense. So somebody has Intune already and they're just looking for some support. Maybe Absolutely. They just finished a deployment, or maybe they've had it a while, but they're maybe more familiar with, say, SCCM, and they just need some help on Intune, and or maybe even looking over shoulder and getting assistance and mentoring, coaching. It sounds like that Gold plan would be a good fit for them.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And then Phil, as we kind of wrap up here, it looks like we've answered and addressed all the questions that came in. Would you mind just wrapping us up?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, just wanted to thank everyone for attending. This webinar was hopefully very informative and some great information on co-management setup and best practices. Just wanted to remind everyone, if you'd like to discuss any of these topics in detail, whether they're around Intune, co-management, or want to engage Patriot for anything we specialize in, the Microsoft security and compliance features and tool sets, please feel free to reach out to your Patriot account executive or your Microsoft account executive. We'd be happy to speak to you in a more one-on-one setting. But again, thank you for attending today. We really appreciate it.